All right, everyone, as you guys can see, yes, I'm at another reefer's home. This is Alfredo. I met him through Cuban Reefer, so he thought it would be a good, another good person to come by and come see their beautiful tank and their setup. So, as we get started here, there are going to be, as you guys know, several questions I'm going to ask, and Alfredo about, how long he's been in this hobby and all this cool stuff. So I hope you guys really enjoy these series. So sit back and let's get to it. So with that being said, Alfredo, I guess my first question to you is, what inspired you to get into the hobby in the first place?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
I've always been in love with the sea. Like my ideal vacation is always to be by the water.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like to go sightseeing. I like nature. And this is as close as I can have something that's nature in my home. So the colors of the coral, the fish, all that is what motivated me to get into the hobby. When I first started, it was something that everybody's like, oh, you're crazy. Getting into saltwater hobby is difficult. It's something, only for experts. And I started with a small biocube. And that little biocube, I started, slowly getting corals in. I couldn't get SPS, because I only had the compact fluorescence, but I had a successful tank. And that's how it all started.
Awesome. So, with that being said, how many years have you now been in the hobby?
So, I had that biocube for 2 years. And then we moved, started a family. I kind of got out of the hobby. Small kids, life gets complicated, priorities change. And I got back in 3 years ago. And this is my third year consecutively in the hobby again.
So, this would be your second tank then?
This would be my third tank.
Oh, your third tank.
When I got back in, I started with a Red Sea 350. I bought a used one. I wanted to see if I still had it, if I could still be successful.
Yeah.
And in less than a year, I was like, I'm ready to upgrade. I wanted to upgrade. So I eventually sold that tank, and what I did is I did a tank transfer to this tank. So the rocks, most of them are still from that Red Sea. The fish mostly are from the Red Sea. So it was kind of like a transition to this tank.
So speaking of that, that's not a question I normally ask, but since you brought it up, as far as transitioning from one tank to another, did you find that to be difficult, or how was it?
It's challenging. So what I did is I set up my tank. I put this tank together off to the side, and when I was ready, I emptied all the water off the Red Sea, put it in brutes, got all the corals, put them in cups, laid them out on the table, and then moved the tank and started the process of filling it with my old water and then new water. And I think that's what helped, the fact that I had the same rocks and the majority of the water. I didn't experience any challenges in terms of cycling or losing corals. I only lost one coral, and it was
no catastrophic event ever happened.
No, but I took my time. It took me 15 hours to do the whole process from removing and placing. So it was a process. Yeah. And my rock work was not this. I had to cycle new rocks. So I had separated 20 gallons of my Red Sea tank's water, and I cycled rocks for a month and a half. Okay. Even though this tank was running. And then I slowly put them in. I didn't have an issue, but I also did things slowly.
Right, key. That's the key too. That's a big part of this hobby.
Yeah.
And speaking of slow, Since you got back into it and all that, do you find it difficult to be patient with these systems?
I guess because I know I have to be patient. I'm not typically a patient person, but for this hobby, I am. It kind of gives me like zen, like it relaxes me. Some people are like, "Oh, I hate the maintenance, and I hate this, and I hate that." I could sit in front of this thing for 3 hours just doing anything, and it's. My wife gets upset at me. She's like, "You're always in front of the tank."
Yeah, it's almost like they get jealous, right?
Yeah, even my kids. Oh, you're working on the tank again?
Again? Yeah.
So, but actually, I think the hobby's easier now than when I first started. You know, I also had a BioCube. It was a lot smaller of a system, and I think the bigger the system is, the easier it is.
I would definitely agree.
So, and I think there's more resources. The technology's changed. Like LEDs. When I had the BioCube, it was 2006, 2007 ish, and we didn't have what we have now.
No.
So, and there's resources online. There's social media.
Yeah.
It helps. And then I've met people locally at the stores. There's some knowledge of the stores, but Cuban Reefer, I met him via social media.
Yeah.
And that's helped because it's people that you see and you want to emulate. And one of the downsides to social media is there's too much information. So what I do is I stick to one thought process, and I follow those people, because if I try to mix different approaches, then I'm never gonna succeed.
That's a good point you brought up, and that was going to be another question. You know, how do you determine what information that you take to implement on your system, or how do you go about deciphering good information from bad information even? So
one of the things is the conception that you have to run an ultra low system to get a SPS, and in my experience in my tank, if my nitrates drop under 5, under 8 actually, I already see colors getting lost. That's my indicator, something's wrong. So I don't follow the ultra low nutrient system method because it doesn't work for my tank. So if somebody tells me, no, I run higher nitrates, higher phosphates, I have this setup, those are the people I listen to because it's what relates to what I have.
Right.
Now, if my system struggled to have nutrients, then I would probably listen to those that have low nutrient systems. So it's an adapting to what your system needs, not what you think it needs.
Also, with that being said, those are great points that you just said. On the flip side of ultra low to non-ultra low, and reasons why, if it's more of what your tank is doing, so you're going to gravitate more to that. And those are very valid points. Also though, for me, after 25 years of doing this, is why is that? Why would one tank run this way or that? And this is where even people with a lot of experience in this hobby, like myself, goes to the board and says, for me, immediately what I want to say is, that is probably happening due to key factors of maybe there's not enough of X, Y, or Z to have your nitrates at above 5 or 8, where it runs better under 5 for whatever reason, or undetectable reasons why they're at 0. But are they at 0? Because you still got color, and these are those.
That's what I say. It's because, and I think new hobbyists have the biggest struggle, because they are like, oh, look at so and so. He runs ultra low.
Right.
Yeah, but his tank is mature, so he has nitrates. It's just everything's consuming
it faster than he can test for it.
You got it, and that's what they don't understand. So they think, no, I need to keep it low, and then they don't succeed, and then they get out of the hobby, because they feel that it's impossible. I actually was telling Javier that I feel people, like the SPS community is dwindling because people are so scared of it because it's difficult.
In reality though, now that you know what you know, it's really not, is it?
Exactly.
It's really cake. SPS to me is really cake work. But like you just said.
It depends.
It depends.
And then you have to me, there's no shortcuts. You know, I don't like the idea of a quick cycle.
Right.
It should be cycling. You know,
Uh-huh.
I know a lot of people are like, no, you don't need sand. I tried no sand, and I went back to sand like that. Because, yeah, it's easy to clean, but I noticed my alkalinity and my calcium and my magnesium were never balanced. I couldn't keep them balanced. And I believe, from my experience, the sand is what helps that balance.
Well, I'm going to tell you from personal experience, sand is definitely one of the key factors, because what is sand? What is sand really?
It's everything. It's actually calcium.
There you go.
Everything
So
there.
it's a buffering agent also, and it's slowly breaking down as well.
Correct.
So it is acting like a calcium reactor or whatever else you want to say.
Correct.
Can you do it without it?
Yeah.
Yes. Me and Javier were talking about this just a little bit ago before we came here, because I was considering doing no sand again, because the community, Rico, you're gonna try no sand, this and that. The reality is, I know why they're asking, but the same thing, I know for a fact that it's going to be 10 times harder unless I'm taking actual live rock from this ocean and setting up my tank. It would probably be the only way that I would get a quick, right now, reef tank. Other than that, I think it will take man-made rock, cycling it for at least almost 2 years or a year, before you even think about throwing SPS in there, would be the only other option. Now that's teaching people patience, but the reality is, when people start these aquariums, none of us in this hobby, I'll probably speak for about 99.9% of us, actually has any kind of patience. This is so
It's hard. It's hard.
We say we're going to be patient, but it is a hard process for ourselves. It really is. But I think when it comes to the sand, no sand thing, I think majority of us that have even succeeded without sand being in the tank would probably still say that it was an easier cycle and things started to rock and roll better with sand versus no sand.
Yeah, and one of the things is, to me, if you're starting without sand, you're already at a handicap. Like you're gonna struggle, because people that have been in the hobby for a long time struggle without sand. It's not gonna be easy for you. And most of the community isn't, marine biology based.
Right.
I'm not in the science field, so there's things that we need to learn.
I got a lot that are engineers, but they're not marine.
Exactly. There's a lot of people. There's a diversity of professions.
Yes.
And unless you are in the marine or even biochemistry, whatever it is, it's you. Yeah, you're an advantage. But if you're just a regular person that's not into that, it's going to be hard. Why make it harder on yourself? I sand. Yeah, I have to clean it. I have a cleanup crew. I have about 26 narcissus snails in there. Like there's a cleanup crew in there.
Right.
And I personally, sand is something I would recommend to anybody starting.
I think also though, even with that being said, for me, I don't think really sand needs to be even touched. I don't think we really need a cleanup crew, but I do think it does help maybe aerate it, keeping anaerobic bacteria down, maybe pockets or sulfur and stuff like that, because the sorry snails are staring it up, releasing them type of gases, or keeping things from really whatever. I think for the most part, if you leave it alone, it's fine. But also what I was going to say is, if you truly want a bare bottom, what I would tell most people, and then I just want to, maybe you concur on this or not, or what's your thoughts on it, is to start your system. If you truly want it, take the hit on the sand, put the sand in, get your tank up and thriving and running good, and slowly over water changes start to remove this thing.
So that's how. So my Red Sea had sand, and I slowly removed it. It took me about 6 water changes. It was always just a little bit, just a little bit.
Yep.
And at the end, I was like, okay, I don't have sand. And then I realized, oh man, I can't keep my elements.
And
in
it
order.
was the,
And before they were consistent. So that's where it's.
now, with that being said, you mean your elements as far as what? Just for
Calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium.
Okay.
You know, the foundation. I couldn't keep them balanced.
now, were you using a calcium reactor?
No, I still don't have a calcium reactor. I'm actually in the process of getting a calcium reactor for this tank.
Okay. So I would just say, if you would have had that calcium reactor,
Probably would have been different.
I could almost guarantee you it'd probably for sure be different because it's those elements are constantly being dosed throughout the day, nonstop.
Correct.
So, for you guys that are listening, there's some sauce in this. Now, make sure you all pay attention and listen. We're going to talk about some of your equipment and stuff, but I think I want to start off though first. What problems have you had with your current tank, and how did you resolve the issues? Oh, that was okay. I hit it. Honey hole here.
So one of the major problems I had was I had a magnet that was in an acrylic case. It cracked and it leaked heavy metals into my tank. And actually, lost a lot of my SPS, and it wasn't a slow process. You start losing one, but when you encounter that, you have to hold on because it's gonna be a month or more of losses, even when you've corrected the problem.
Right.
So I think that was the hardest part. That was the biggest problem I had with my tank. Like that one hit hard because I lost a lot of coral.
Yeah.
Another thing is I had a different light setup before. When I first started, I just had hydras. I got the T5s, and then I stayed with the hydras. And the hydras were great for my 350. I had 3 hydras, and they were great for my 4-foot tank.
Right.
But when I got to this tank that's wider, deeper, longer, it wasn't enough. I had hot spots and I couldn't get it, so I had to upgrade my lighting. So, and then other problems I had have been algae. I had on the frag tank, I connected the frag tank and I've had an algae problem in my frag tank. And, one of the reasons is I don't have any algae-eating fish in my frag tank. So my tangs eat all the bubble algae and all the lettuce algae, but there's nobody in that tank that would eat that. So what I was doing is the frags, I would put them in this tank for maybe an hour, and I would come back and put them back in my frag tank, and my tanks would clean it up. And alkalinity has been a challenge because at first, I was using a salt that had high alkalinity. It's going to help with growth, it's going to help with this, it's going to help with that. And slowly
Can I ask what salt that is?
Red Sea Pro.
Okay.
It runs high alk. And I didn't really see, what the results were advertised. And what I was encountering is I was teetering at a level of alkalinity that was not leaving a lot of room for error. So if I had a swing, it was like it could swing really high or it could swing really low, and then to get it back up at that level, it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
So I eventually transitioned to slowly lower my alkalinity, and I use salt that's comparable to the alkalinity I have.
So what salt are you
So I was
using
using Red Sea, the blue bucket. And then recently, I actually started using Tropic Marine Pro.
Okay, and how are you with that?
I've only done one water change with it.
Okay, so it's still young.
One thing I do is I don't do a lot of water changes.
No, I don't believe in a lot either.
I only do water changes if I had to dose a chemical, or if I've had, like my tin went high, I did a water change. But I try not to do water changes. What I do is I dose a lot of trace, and I use the moonshiner's method.
Okay.
So I, dose my trace, and I try not to do water changes. and it's worked for me so far.
So what traces do you dose?
The whole Moonshiner collection.
Okay, I've heard of them recently, but I don't know.
It's anything you run on the ATI ICP test. It's pretty much what you're dosing. So what you do is you start the process. The first one, you get your test, and there's a Excel. You plug in your numbers, and it tells you the correction. The first couple of corrections were large. One of the things I noticed is fluoride. I was low, and boron I was low. And in the middle of all that, I noticed that my strontium kept on increasing, and I couldn't figure out why. And it was because I was using the Red Sea calcium, and that Red Sea calcium has strontium and calcium. So then I had to change to Brightwell calcium, that's just pure calcium. So it's kind of given me a good baseline on how to control my trace elements.
Right.
And I send in an ICP test every 2 to 3 months, not only to check for any problems that might come,
right,
but also to check on my trace.
So now this is where 25 years versus 5 years come in, right?
Exactly.
So with that being said, now obviously everybody can do their own thing and whatever they feel comfortable with, and whatever tickles your pickle, because it's it's your money. You work your 40, 80, 60 hours, whatever it is a week. Remember, but this is a nice interview conversation thing just for other people to hear these great talks. So my first thing goes to anytime I hear something, a good story like that, like this is why whatever. 25 years will tell me, instead of doing that method, why not just did your water change that has all your elements right there, replenishes everything, and be done with it? Because you knew when you started your system, this is the only system that you knew was going to work to make you have a reef tank in the first place. That bucket of salt, whatever bucket of salt you choose to go with, already had those elements. Now, there are buckets of salt that says plus this or plus that. It's going to give you higher this, higher that. We're not going to, we could debunk some of that stuff and whatever, it's a marketing tactic and whatever else. But the reality is, that bucket of salt, regardless of what name it is good to have whatever corals in your system that you want. So why not just do a dosing setup using maybe even dosing pumps where you can water change 1 gallon a day every day to replenish all those elements and call it good, and versus
having to dose
whatever, or do your once a month water change just to replenish those elements and have a calcium reactor that's going to balance out the calcium alkalinity no matter what 24/7.
So the reason I went this no water change is when I got the larger system, I said, okay, I tested and everything was running smooth. And it was a month in and everything was still balanced. And my corals were super happy. I'm like, So then I started seeing what happens when I do a water change. And then, yes, you replace those trays, but
you upset the corals.
You upset the corals.
But why would you upset the corals? This is 5 years. Okay.
There's a couple of things. First is one thing I tell people, and I tell people this, and they think, oh, I never thought of that. When you lower the water and your corals are outside the water, I don't have my lights on, because these lights get hot.
They do get hot.
And then the water's not there.
Yeah.
And then what's happening to your corals? Yeah, they have slime, but it takes a while. It's not something you do like quick. The other thing is my nitrates and my phosphates. They kept on getting to a level of balance. I would do a water change, they would get imbalanced. They would get balanced. I would do a water change, they would get. So I was noticing that was what was affecting my water change the most. Like my nitrates and my phosphates went from balance to unbalanced. And the way I look at it is, you can have your nitrates high or low, but you have to have them balanced. If you have them balanced, you're going to have success. If you have high phosphates and low nitrates, you're not. And if it's vice versa, you're not. But if they're balanced, you're going to be good. And that's when I noticed my corals were the happiest, when I wouldn't touch the system. So that's when I said, okay, how I found moonshiners with your thought process.
Yeah.
How am I going to replace these elements without upsetting my corals?
Right.
And that's when I found out, oh, I could. There's a way that I could dose these individual trace elements, and you know, there's a lot of companies or a lot of products you could use.
Correct.
I chose that because it was easy for me. I'm not saying it's the
Yeah,
best.
no, yeah, right.
And I'm not saying it's the only way to go, but it was easy for me.
And that's the whole thing about this video. And I don't want people to think, oh, Rico's having a debate with another fellow reefer. Is it a debate or is it an open conversation? Okay, so guys, I just want to stay on track. Now, after he said all that, I'm still going to go back to, and once again, it's not a debate. My first thing I said was, why not set up a doser and do 1 gallon water changes? You can never upset the system by more frequent small water changes versus one large. That's like you've never had a caffeine drink that's got 10 shots of straight pure caffeine. Let me give that to you and see how upset your body is and how you're going to be bouncing off the walls and probably not feel too good or look too hot after all that. So that was kind of where I was going with
your
that.
Your idea is good.
Yeah.
I just don't have the setup for it right now.
And you don't have, all right. And that's what I want, people to hear. Like, hey, I'm listening to both sides. Both people got great points. And it really, once again, it comes down to, do you have the room for the extra stuff? Do you have, the time or the money right now to make that work for it or whatever? But the whole point is to give people different ways to look at things and pick something that works for them.
So back to, you start the hobby and it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's as difficult as you want to make it.
Correct.
You make a commitment, you have to realize, hey, I'm going to have it. I'm going to go on a trip, I need to have somebody to come watch my tank. You have all those things in line now.
Yes.
What's going to help your routine? Okay, is your routine going to be something that you could, dedicate
an extra 30 minutes or whatever the case may be?
Or are you going to have something that's going to be automated because you don't have time and you need to go into hobby going, hey, I need to factor in that when I go in, I'm going to have this because it's going to make it work and I'm not going to fail.
Right.
And I think that's the problem. People, go in and they're trying to fit their life. they're trying to fit the hobby in the life that it doesn't really work, but there's tools to help it work.
And if it was to work, it's probably only working for you, but not your wife and your kids.
Correct. Oh, and I've had the benefit. I've been working from home during COVID. I've been working from home, so it's different. I'm here all the time. Anything goes wrong, I pick up on it like that. Not everybody's like that. Before, when I wasn't working from home, I would get home. I'm like, what happened?
Right.
My ATO. Why did it dump 5 gallons today? Like, what happened? Oh, the sensor was bad. Whereas I'm here, I hear it, and I'm like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah.
So there's different things, and there's things are out of your control.
Right. So, with that all being said, are there any changes you would make now with this setup? Is there anything that you would have done different when you decided to try? Yeah.
Before I started, or that I'm planning? Because I told you I'm planning to put a calc reactor.
Right.
I have my alkalinity dosing. I dose alkalinity every hour, and then on the half hours I have to dose.
You got to get a geocalcium reactor.
Yeah, I need a calcium reactor. That's why I'm going. It's gotten to a point, in the beginning it wasn't a lot of consumption, and now it's gotten to a point that it's.
Oh yeah, as these things start to take off, you're going to run through.
Yeah. So
solution like it's nobody's business.
Correct. So that's one thing I want to do, and. Probably if I would have started, if I would have started today again, I would have gone bigger. And I've been in stores and I see people talk and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna get the little, 4-footer."
Honestly, looking, that's a perfect end cap wall. So there, I think I would probably go about 10 feet. That's probably a good 10 feet. Yeah, I would go 10 feet.
I mean, I don't disagree, but I always, when I'm in the store and I ever hear somebody talking about buying a tank, I always tell them, go bigger, go
Yeah,
bigger.
go as big as you possibly
Because
can.
it happens. It's just you
Yep.
you want it bigger. Either you want more fish, or in my case, my fish are growing and now they're getting aggressive.
Yeah.
I have to probably take one out. I don't want to, but I have to.
Yeah.
You know, and those are things that you don't plan when you're like, oh, 5 feet's gonna be enough. And then it's like, no, maybe I should have gone 6. Maybe I should have gone 10. 300 gallons sounds good.
Yeah, right?
It's 300 gallon system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those are things that, and what I do is when I do my upgrades now, I always upgrade, like the calcium reactor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting one for this tank. I'm getting one that's bigger, because if
Okay.
tomorrow I want to get a bigger tank, I already got the calcium reactor. I don't have to then start from scratch.
Right. So let's say prior to the calcium reactor though, with your current setup, outside the calcium reactor, is there anything you would actually have done different to this system, current, prior to whatever?
If other than that, I'm pretty satisfied where it is now.
That's awesome.
I've
That's awesome.
gotten off I had a carbon reactor. I've been running with a carbon reactor for a while now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's working. I don't have a GFO reactor. All I have is macroalgae reactor and my skimmer, and then my dosers, and that's it. The idea that you need all this equipment, it's nice, but you don't really need it.
Right.
There's a misconception that you can't have success without the top of the line equipment, but to me, you can have good equipment and it works. And maybe you don't have all of it, or maybe you want to invest on something that's going to be more top of the line, but you don't have to have them all.
Right.
It would do what works.
Sometimes less is more, depending on the situation.
It is. I mean, there's one thing that's left that I have to do, is that I want to. These tanks come with a manifold. So the manifold is what feeds my UV sterilizer, which feeds my frag tank, which then drops back down to my sump. Now my algae reactor, I have it on a pump. I want to put it on a manifold. So I want to have everything on one manifold, so I don't have to have multiple pumps.
Yeah.
Less equipment is, in my opinion, less equipment means less things that could probably affect your tank.
Less things to go wrong or
Yeah,
die
exactly.
on you and all that other stuff.
Exactly.
And that leaves room for having an extra pump on the shelf somewhere in the closet. Just, it's easy. If something takes a crap, maybe you can have a backup of whatever versus, backup of 5 different kinds of pumps and all that.
Correct. It's simple to me. The more simple it is, the better.
And the more you're apt to actually work on your stuff when it's not cluttered.
Oh, it's much easier. It's much easier, because when I had the skimmer, I had the reactor, I was like, oh, this is too much. Like, it's too much.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier. And it's one of those things that I go back to. The hobby is going to be as complicated or as easy as you want to make it. You have to have patience. Don't expect you're going to put a core and it's going to grow and it's going to branch. It's not going to happen. Things are going to die. Whoever tells you that they never had anything die is lying.
Yeah, they're definitely lying.
Whoever says they've never had pests is a lie. I dip with bear, and I've had pests.
And you still get the pest. They find their way in no matter what.
So to me,
Yeah, right.
you never know, So you try to do what you can to keep things under control. And one thing that I could recommend to everybody is never compare yourself to everybody else's tank. Just do your own tank.
And that was my next question. What advice could you give anybody?
It's do your own thing. Don't chase them. Don't say, okay, this person says I have to run it at this. No, see what works for you. Back to phosphate and nitrates.
Nitrates.
So when I see that things are losing color, I test, and usually my nitrates are low, but my phosphates aren't. So what I do, I dose a little bit of nitrate, get them back into balance, and that's it. They start running again, and I don't have to worry about it. Because there's I don't know the reason, but every 3, 4, 5 weeks, all of a sudden my nitrates drop, and my phosphates don't.
So everybody's going to ask, what nitrates do you choose to dose?
I use the Brightwell.
Yep.
Yeah. I've slowly transitioned to Brightwell, it works for me.
Yeah, no, Brightwell has, there's quite a few products that I actually love myself. Brightwell, you know.
Yeah.
When I don't know if you remember, I had a tank crash using another salt, and first time Brightwell stepped in and introduced me to Pure. I didn't know what Pure was. Nobody did. BRS did. Nobody knew. But it worked great on binding up whatever was in the tank and stopping coral heads from popping off the euphilia and stuff like that. But no, there's a lot of stuff that Brightwell has that are good, but also there's a lot of crap that they have as well, you know, stuff. But I want people to understand, all these companies have good and bad as well. Not every piece of equipment or dosing agent that sits on their shelf
It's perfect.
is perfect. I'm just being 110% honest. So there are certain things that are going to work and certain things that not so much.
That are not.
So
Just, I bet the best advice is don't chase numbers and then don't go to the extremes. You know, you run high alk, you're playing with fire. You run low alk, you're playing with fire. Keep it in the middle. You know, does it have to be 8? Does it have to be,
No,
you know,
just
8.1? Just
pick something in the middle so you got a little bit of wiggle room.
and match your salt to it. I think that's the biggest thing I've noticed. Some people.
Yes, whatever salt you pick, depending on those numbers, use that alk and calcium number as that starting point. So if that's where you want to be, if you want to start off with reef crystals, with this higher elk or this red sea, whatever, or whatever the case may be, understand those are going to be your numbers and that you need to whatever. Me personally, I like the palette salt that actually is just kind of neutral, kind of right in the middle of every number that you have ever told when you started this hobby that you should, you know, be in between this and this. I like to find the salt myself personally, which has always been Instant Oceans for. I only went outside the box recently, but I'm going back to Instant Ocean. But that it's always worked. And why do most of us hobbyists, even the old school, just stick with it? We don't chase salts. Chasing salt can end up very bad. Don't know why. Maybe just some bad batches or misleading things that obviously if you just took the time and test prior to putting the stuff in, you'd probably see hint, hint, that some things ain't what they say they are neither. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. No, and also, you know, you can't change salts. You know, you run 8, and all of a sudden you go to 11.
That's a big jump. That's a spike. And you're especially depending on what side, you know, how much you're changing out. But regardless, you're still spiking your system.
Correct.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that as well. Now, is that the manufacturer's fault? No, that falls on the user itself. Unfortunately, because first, you knew you was using salt maybe at 7 alk or 8 alk, and then you chose to jump at one that's 11 or 12 or whatever the case may be, and did a significant water change. So, you chose to, you know, and didn't read the small print, which nobody reads anymore, but those are the little things that will make you a better reefer and make you start thinking before you do some of the things. But that comes with time, just like your reef tank. It takes time for your reef tank to actually settle in and start to thrive. Reasons why? Because it's just waiting for those perfect elements to just be perfect. We as hobbyists, we become more perfect, which there's technically no such thing, but we get well more in tune with our thinking process when it comes to reef aquariums and what we should or should not be doing, or how we're going to approach the situation versus just jumping in head first and then saying, oh crap, I messed up, you know. So there's a big difference between a new hobbyist and an old hobbyist, and that's kind of what these videos are about. Just to hear people talk, hear different people's perspective on it and their way of thinking, and just matching apples and oranges ultimately. And you know, these videos should make everybody think twice about their next move. Speaking of the next move, you are talking as if you are planning a bigger tank, though.
I would love a bigger tank. Actually, but I know that for now I'm with this. But I don't want to limit myself. So if I'm gonna invest $700-800 on a calcium reactor, and if I spend a little bit more, I'm gonna future-proof myself. I'm just gonna do it. But that's me. I
think that you have a great point on doing that. I mean, why buy twice when you can buy once?
Yeah, exactly. and it's just, and also because, it's rated for a heavy load, medium load, but I don't know what my load's gonna be when everything grows, or if everything dies and I don't have a lot. We don't know. We don't know. It goes back to corals die. And sometimes they die and it's out of our control. Like there's nothing we could have done to, it just happened. It's an organism, it could die, it could get sick, it could die. It doesn't make you a bad reefer, it doesn't make you a good reefer, it just makes you a reefer. It's part of it. So who knows? I mean, if everything I have now takes off, I'm gonna have a problem keeping up my alkalinity and calcium. Like if it really takes off, like some of these tanks that have been around 2 to 3 years, I'm probably gonna have a calcium reactor and still have to supplement calcium and alkalinity. I just don't know.
You don't know. If they want to drink, they're going to drink.
Correct. So and they drink. One thing is testing. I test once a week, always. However, if I see something's different, I test when I see something's off. And even testing once a week, I've had drops in my alkalinity from 8 to 6.2 with no explanation. And then even if I try to correct it slowly, it takes me 3 to 4 weeks just to get it back to you.
It's no different than us. Some days we can eat a cow, other days we eating like a bird.
Exactly. So, I test is important.
So before we finish this up, can you give us and then I will go ahead and pan through the equipment and add it in as well here, but can you, in a close-up shot of the tank and all that cool stuff, but can you give us a complete breakdown of your lighting, your schedule of your lighting, and all the pieces of equipment that you have actually, and the names of the equipment that you're running?
Okay, so my LEDs are the Ecotech G5s, the blue. I chose blue because everybody was like, it looks better blue. I looked at videos, I couldn't see an actual reason why they were different. And I just went with blue because I figured, it works. My schedule actually just used the programmed Ecotech AD Plus schedule. I run it 12 hours, and then I run my T5s 7 hours. And then my T5s, it's the Aquatic Life hybrid. And my bulbs are ATI. I have 2 Blue Plus and 2 Coral Plus. I used to run Blue Plus and 1 Purple Plus, but I felt I wasn't getting the colors I wanted, so I added the Coral Plus, and I see it. One thing that I like is I see colors even when my lights are running at full spectrum. There's a lot of tricks on Instagram and on TikTok and to make corals pop. But to me, if they have color when you're running at full spectrum, you should be very proud of yourself.
You don't need Photoshop.
Correct. My equipment is, I have a C-shaped pump that I just actually got.
Which C-shape? CJ?
Yeah.
Which one?
The 9.0, the
9.0
SDC.
SDC? Yeah. Nice
and
pump.
actually, I used to have a J-bow because I was, when you start, it gets expensive, and whatever you can save, you can save.
When you got a wife and family and all that, let me tell you. I know, I'm with you. I got 5 kids in a way.
So I had J-bow, and it worked for me, and I never had any problems. I upgraded it, and what I did notice is the reason my tank was running warmer than I didn't have an explanation for it. You're here, you feel my house is cool. It was my pump. My pump was actually heating up. So that's the pump I run. I have the Red Sea skimmer. the PSX 600. I actually like that it's easy to maintain.
Yeah.
It has a drain, and I just drain it out. I turn the top, and it gives me a view. I can see it. It's very easy maintenance. For the last month and a half, I've had the Pax Bellum reactor.
Okay.
The reason I got a reactor is because I was tired of my macroalgae going through the crate and getting into my skimmer and having to pull it out of the skimmer.
Yeah.
It was creating a mess for me.
Yeah.
So I decided, I'm gonna do a reactor. The reason I went with Pax Bellum is because future thinking is they have a kit that you could hook up to your calcium reactor, so it runs through it.
Yeah.
And it captures that CO2.
The low CO2.
So that's the reason I went with them. I know there's others. There's the algae scrubber, Clearwater. They're all good. It's just I try to think, okay, if I'm going to do this, how's it going to help me in the future?
Correct.
That's the reason I went with it. It's actually really easy to maintain. I actually want to take it out of the bottom of the sump and put it somewhere where I could just take it out and make it easier access. And so I had a J-Bow doser, and I took off my alkalinity off of it because I was having problems calibrating it. And I have a Versa doser that's just for my alkalinity, and then my calcium and my magnesium are on my J-Bow.
Oh, okay.
I just feel that with alkalinity, accuracy is a lot more important than with calcium. My calcium's 425 today, or it was 415. It's not a big deal.
Right.
My alkalinity, one day is 8, another day is 9, another day is back to 7. I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
So that's why I went with the Ecotech one. It's a single head. I haven't had any problems. I love it. I could program it on the phone. It's great. That's about it. I don't have anything.
That's it. And besides the UV sterilizer.
Oh, the UV sterilizer, yeah, which I also got recently, and so far.
You can't go wrong. It's just for everybody. Yeah, people always ask me, Rico, why you got a UV sterilizer? No particular reason. I just don't run them usually. Do they work? Yeah, they'll keep your water clear. Better penetration for your light getting through, because your tank might look clear, but you don't know until you get a white bucket and dump some of that water in it and see that yellow tank. So you'll see a difference with an algae or UV sterilizer. You won't have that as much.
Yeah.
So it'll make it clear. That means if it's clear, that means the light's penetrating more. You get better spectrum and everything else on your coral. So just because I don't run them usually doesn't mean you guys should. You got to do what's best for you. I think that's the hardest part. For me, being on social media, influencer, whatever you want to call it, when they see what you do and people respect you as this, entity here on social media, they try to emulate you all the time. And I get, it's not that I don't take it as a flattering thing, but I'm like pounding and knocking on your head like, don't do what I do. Do you, because I'm not with your aquarium. I'm not handling your aquarium. I'm not babysitting it. I'm not feeding it. I'm not dosing it. I'm not doing any of these things. I truly don't know what your aquarium is doing. I know what mine's doing because this is mine in my home. We're not going to act the same, and they're not going to grow the same, and they're not going to experience the same things all the time. So, I'm flattered when people want to try to emulate me, but at the same time, or emulate anybody on social media, you have to do what's best for you. And I'm trying to get this point across for a long time now. And
I think we've said it multiple times.
Yeah. So hopefully this video, it can, people can understand that I'm trying to pound this into your head. It's flattering that you guys respect and want to, try to do what somebody else is doing, but your child, my wife just had a baby, your wife just had a baby. Those kids are going to grow up totally different. They got totally different genes, totally different ways of raising, whatever the case may be. You know this, so you have to understand that your tank is always going to be different. Take some things. It's not that you can't take some of the advices or some of the good points and roll them with light selection or UV sterilizer selections and stuff like those type of stuff. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty of dosing certain elements or this or that, that's totally got to be on you. You have to figure that out for yourself.
I think you could have said it clear. Like, see, I had an undersized UV sterilizer. It was my water was fine,
Yeah.
but I wanted it to be clear. And it's not that I needed it to be clear.
Right.
I wanted it to
be clear.
And
Right.
that's the thing. That it's like, you know, there's certain things that it's a want and a need. So, do you need one? No.
No.
Are you eventually gonna want one because you want that water to be like your fish are floating? Yes.
And
You know, or if you have an issue with, you know, parasites or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
you want that, then you have to make sure you run it at the flow for that, because it's not just plugging it in and I have the UV. You have to make sure you have it at the right flow for what you want it to do.
Another great point. You got to understand the flow. And you need to make sure that you're running it for what you want it to do. You want it to kill parasites, then you're going to want slower flow through that so it has more contact time with that. Or you want clear water, then have at it. But either way, you do have to understand that you can't just buy one and then hook it up and don't understand the flow that it needs for whatever reason or what you're trying to use it for. So with that being said, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to come visit your beautiful aquarium, having us in your home. Myself, and obviously I'm down here for saltwateraquarium.com as well. But I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you for having us here. And,
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, hope to have another visit sometime when this bad boy's all grown out.
Yeah.
So.
When it grows out and I have to give you some clippings because I run out of room, that's what I
Well,
want.
I'm building a 180 as we speak, so we're getting. I got a lot of work still to do with electrical and stuff like that, but. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, Fred, once again,